We begin our World Brief today with a look at South Sudan. The first day of ceasefire discussions between members of the South Sudanese warring parties attempt to agree to a cessation of violence, and the talks are taking place in neighbouring Ethiopia. Now, they're expected to continue beyond Friday. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has sent delegates to meet with rival rebel factions loyal to ousted former Deputy Minister Riek Machar to attempt to draw a line under violence, which has already seen the death of over 1,000 people since December 15. Now, fighting between the two warring sides has escalated in the past few months in South Sudan, the newest country in the world. Now, so far, an estimated 180,000 people have been displaced as a result of violence in South Sudan's Jonglei State and Unity State. However, the Associated Press reports that in the last few days, rebels have set their sights on Juba, the South Sudanese capital. And violence erupted after President Kiir, who leads the country's majority Dinka group, fired his deputy Machar, who is one of the heads of the second largest political group in the country, called the Nuer. Now, amidst the violence comes a humanitarian crisis. Clean water, food and sanitation supplies are desperately low as fighting has disrupted supply routes and driven people away from villages to avoid being caught in the fray. Well, joining me now to discuss what's been going on today in Addis Ababa and the South Sudan talks, we have Nicholas Coolish, New York Times East Africa correspondent, and also Matthew Lariche, author of South Sudan, From Revolution to Independence. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Nicholas, I want to start with you. Can you just outline for people that don't really know what's going on, what is at stake here if these ceasefire talks fail?
Well, I mean, I think that if the peace talks fail, then you're going to see a lot more fatalities, both from the fighting and from the very difficult to reach displaced people who are in dire need.
And, you know, in terms of the backstory of what's been going on here, South Sudan is of the world's newest country, and we outlined that at the beginning after gaining independence from Sudan in 2011. So, you know, where do the troubles that we're seeing today stem from?
Well, I mean, I think you saw a rivalry between President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar for quite some time. Mr. Machar had actually led a faction that started a civil war within the civil war that fought against the Sudan People's Liberation Army. But things really started coming to a boil in July when the president fired Vice President Machar and sort of set up what was probably a confrontation that was going to come eventually, and that was set off just last month when there was some shooting at a presidential guard station.
Right, you know, Matthew, kind of coming to you, you know, you wrote a book all about South Sudan. So, you know, just tell me a little bit about the people's allegiances. You know, where are people's loyalties lying at the moment, sort of on the ground? I mean, talking sort of regular citizens of South Sudan. Are they loyal to the rebels or are they loyal to the president?
Well, of course, it's a massive question to ask as to whether who's loyal to who when you're talking about your average citizen. But I think it's really important to reiterate the fact that the distinctions that a lot of people are talking about are not as clear as I think a lot of people are presenting.
So when you're talking about these distinctions then, can you go into a little bit more detail about that? You
Sure.
know, what are the grey areas then?
Well, of course, I mean, in your intro, you mentioned the President Salva Kiir being a representative of a political group or the Dinka group. That is not as clear-cut a sort of line. I mean, he's a political leader. He has supporters who are also members of a tribe that he is a part of. But a lot of the people he is in competition with are also from the Dinka tribe. And they, you know, so individuals identify with some of these leaders for a whole raft of different reasons. Some of them personal ambition, some of them associated with who they feel can bring the most to their community. And the vast majority of people, I would suggest, are probably just frustrated with the fact that a group of political elites are engaged in a competition, and they're going to be the ones who suffer the consequences.
Yeah, you know, you're talking a little bit about suffering the consequences. You know, how do we, you know, do we know anything about how the United Nations, NGOs, are attempting to help the displaced people? I mean, we mentioned 180,000 displaced already, you know, 1,000 at least killed since December 15th. What is being done to actually help people? I mean, what's been able to get through to people on the ground?
Well, after the initial few days of confrontation, people in South Sudan are quite effective at moving, avoiding the conflict, and so as a result, it was difficult for the UN and other organizations to find where the immediate groups of who had need were. Granted, that we've been involved in the country for so long, the international community does have a pretty good system being able to reach most parts of the South, as long as they have information that people are there who are in need.